All right. So you've given us like a really in-depth set of sources this time about salmon farming.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're really zeroing in on Atlantic salmon and their diet,
Yeah.
specifically how the minerals in their food affect their health
That's right.
and the quality, of the fish as a whole.
Yeah, we've got this like huge study here and done in Norway,
Okay.
all across the country, different regions, different feeding strategies for the salmon.
Interesting.
And what we're going to do today is really like unpack the main things they found.
Okay.
Try to make it make sense for you because it's complex stuff.
Yeah, it's modern salmon feeds changed a lot, right? Like it used to be mostly from the ocean, like marine ingredients, but now they're using a lot more plant-based stuff.
Yeah, a lot more plant-based ingredients, and that
And that means that you got to add more micronutrients and minerals.
exactly. So you got to supplement that, and that's what this whole study is about.
Right.
It's looking at how those supplements, how those minerals specifically, really impact the salmon.
Like how much do you give them? What kind?
Yeah, and this isn't just like a tiny lab experiment.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about 12 full-scale feeding trials across Norway, North Midwest,
Okay.
involving both spring smolts, the ones from one spring, and autumn smolts, the ones from the previous autumn.
Okay.
0 plus 1 plus, all in actual commercial farms.
Okay, so real-world stuff.
This is real-world stuff.
Yeah, this isn't just theory. This
is the real deal.
Okay.
So it should be like super relevant for you.
Okay, so the big question is, how do different levels of these minerals and sources, like are they organic or inorganic?
Right.
How does that affect the fish?
Exactly.
And we're talking about copper, iron, manganese, zinc, selenium, all those.
Yep, all the key trace minerals.
And how does that affect the fish's production, the quality of the fish when you eat it? Their welfare, how they're living, and even how those minerals build up in their bodies, which I guess is called mineralization.
Mineralization. Yep, it's all connected, all these different aspects.
And just to clarify, I think throughout this we'll be talking about ML.
Yeah, ML, that's mineral level.
Mineral level, okay.
And when we say ML2, we're talking about the low iron manganese and high zinc diet.
Okay.
Which we could call the reduced mineral premix diet sometimes, just to keep it shorter.
Reduced mineral premix diet. Okay, I got it.
Got it.
All right, so let's jump into this.
Yeah, let's start with the overall performance.
Okay.
And what happens when they're ready for slaughter.
Okay.
Now, this is important for you to know. Those smaller lab studies,
Yeah.
they might say that just adding more minerals or different kinds makes salmon grow faster.
Right.
But in this big real-world study, it turns out that's not always true.
Oh, okay.
In commercial farms, things are way more complicated.
Right.
So you can't always just pump them full of minerals and expect amazing results.
Yeah, because I guess out in the ocean, it's not a controlled environment.
Exactly. There are so many other factors.
Right.
Like water temperature diseases.
Right, all that stuff.
All sorts of things going on that can overshadow the impact of the minerals alone.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it really shows the difference between the lab and the real world.
Right.
And the study found other really important things, too.
Okay.
Smolt age, for example.
Yeah.
That had a big impact on mortality rates.
Okay.
The 1+ smolts, the spring ones, they had higher mortality compared to the 0+ autumn smolts.
Okay.
And the location of the farm mattered, too.
Oh, really?
Farms in the mid-region had lower mortality overall.
Interesting.
So that could be because of, different ways of handling the fish in different regions.
Right.
Or maybe just different diseases that are more common in certain areas.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But location definitely played a role.
Okay.
And then when you look at growth, they measured something called the thermal growth coefficient, or
Okay.
TGC.
TGC.
And basically that tells you how well the fish grow compared to the water temperature.
Okay.
So a higher TGC means they're growing well, even if the water's not that warm.
Okay.
And then they found that it varied a lot across the regions.
Okay.
The north had the highest TGC.
Interesting.
And the west had the lowest.
Okay.
But the interesting part is that the 1+ smolts on that reduced mineral premix diet.
Okay, the ML2?
Yeah, the ML2 actually had higher TGC.
Interesting.
And so did the 0+ smolts on the other mineral level, the ML1.
Okay, so different ages, different mineral levels, but both had higher TGC.
Yeah, and that kind of makes you wonder about those specific minerals, right?
Right, does it matter how much of each one they're getting?
Yeah, and the study also mentions that too much iron might actually be bad for the growth of those 1+ smolts.
Really?
So it's not just about the total amount of minerals, it's about the balance.
Right, the right mix.
The right mix for each age group.
Makes sense.
Then there's the feed conversion ratio, or FCW.
Okay, what is that?
That basically tells you how much food you need to give a salmon to get 1 kilogram of growth.
Okay.
So lower is better because it means they're using the food more efficiently.
Right, less waste.
Exactly. And guess what? The 0+ smolts, they had the best FCRE.
Okay, so the younger ones are better at converting.
Seems like it. And the North region had the lowest FCRE overall.
Well, again, the North is doing well.
Yeah, they're doing something right up there.
Yeah.
And this commits to some other research that suggests that colder temperatures
Yeah.
might actually make salmon more efficient with their food.
Really?
So that could be part of it, or maybe the farms up north just have better practices.
Right, or a combo.
Yeah, who knows? But
Okay.
it's interesting.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the fish themselves, like how healthy and well developed they are.
Right.
They measure that using something called the condition factor, or CF.
Okay.
CF. And basically, a higher CF means a plumper, healthier fish.
Okay.
And they found that the fish on the ML2 diet, that reduced mineral premix diet, they actually had a higher condition factor.
Interesting. So less minerals overall, but healthier.
Well, it's not just about less minerals, remember, it's about that specific mix.
Right.
They had higher zinc and selenium in the MLT diet.
Okay.
And those minerals are really important for antioxidant systems,
Okay.
which basically protect the fish from damage.
Okay, like little bodyguards.
Exactly. So it might not just be about being bigger, but also about having better internal health.
Makes sense.
And then when they actually slaughtered the fish, they graded them, for quality, superior quality versus kind of like production grade.
Okay.
And they found that the 0+ smolts and the fish on the ML1 diet had more of those top superior grades.
Interesting. So the younger ones again and the ML1.
Yeah, and also the North region had more superior fish too.
Okay, so the North is killing it.
They're doing well, and this suggests that it's not just one thing that matters. It's the edge of the fish, the minerals they get, and the environment they're raised in.
Okay.
It all adds up.
Right. It's all connected.
All connected.
So let's move on to the fillet quality.
Yeah, let's talk about what you actually eat.
Okay, so when they processed the fish, they looked at the slaughter yield,
Right.
which I guess is how much of the whole fish you can actually use.
Exactly, like what percentage becomes usable product.
Okay, and that was better with the ML1 diet and with organic minerals?
Interesting. So back to ML1 being better in this case.
Yeah, but also the age and location mattered too.
Right. Of course, it's never simple.
So the 0+ fish had better yield in the north, but the 1+ fish did better in the west.
Yeah, it's like different regions favor different ages.
Yeah, that is weird.
And, some lab studies didn't find a clear link between mineral levels and slaughter yield.
Okay.
But this real-world study shows that it's different in commercial farms.
Oh, interesting.
When you've got all these other factors at play, the minerals can actually make a difference.
Okay.
So it's another example of how the real world is more complicated than the lab.
Right, right.
Then there's fillet yield, which is how much of the fish becomes fillet.
Okay, that's what we care about.
That's the good stuff. And that was affected by age location, and specifically that ML2 diet.
The reduced mineral premix diet. Okay.
The reduced mineral premix diet. And get this, the fish from the West actually had the highest fillet yield.
Really? Even though they were smaller sometimes?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that something else is going on in the West. Maybe their body composition is different.
Okay.
Or maybe they process them differently in that region.
Interesting.
But it's clear that it's not just about the overall size of the fish.
Right.
Other factors are at play.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about something nobody likes, gapping.
Oh, yeah. Those holes, gaps in the fillet.
Nobody wants that. And I found that gaping scores were higher in the North and the West.
Okay.
And also that more severe gaping was linked to the ML1 diet,
Interesting.
which, remember, had higher iron levels.
Okay.
And this is where the whole mineral interplay gets really important.
Okay.
You see, there's this thing called an antagonistic relationship between iron and copper.
Antagonist, like they don't get along.
They're like rivals, competing with each other.
Okay.
And copper is really important for strong connective tissue in the fish.
Okay, so it holds the fillet together.
Exactly. It's like the glue that keeps it from falling apart.
Okay.
But when you have too much iron, like in the ML1 diet, it can mess with copper absorption.
Okay, so the iron's like blocking the copper.
Yeah, it's like hogging all the space and not letting the copper do its job.
And that leads to gaping.
Exactly. The connective tissue gets weak and you get those gaps.
Okay, so it's not just about adding more minerals, it's about the balance.
Exactly. The right balance is crucial.
Okay.
And then there were those melanin spots too, those dark spots in the fillet.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And they were more common in the 1+ fish and the ones on the ML1 diet.
Okay.
And the North had the most melanin spots.
Huh. Interesting.
And there's some research suggesting that low mineral content in the fillet could be linked to these spots.
Oh, really?
So again, it's pointing to the importance of mineral balance.
Right.
And remember how we talked about copper being important for connective tissue?
Oh.
Well, it's also involved in melanin production.
Oh, okay. So too little copper could lead to more spots.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Wow, it's like a delicate dance.
It really is.
Okay, what about the color of the fillet?
Yeah, that's important too. You know that nice pink color?
Oh, it's
They measured that using the Salmon score.
okay.
And they found that 0+ fish and the ML1 fish had higher Salmon scores.
Okay, so they were pinker.
Yeah, they were pinker. But here's the weird part. The North region, which had the fastest growing fish,
Yeah.
they actually had lower coloration.
Really?
Yeah, it seems like growing too fast can actually dilute the pigment that gives salmon their color.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe the fish in the North need even more of that pigment in their diet.
To compensate for the fast growth.
Exactly, to get that nice pink color that people expect.
Makes sense.
Then there's muscle fat content,
Okay.
which was higher in 0+ fish from the North and the ones on the ML1 diet.
Okay.
And remember, the ML1 diet had higher manganese.
Right?
Well, manganese is linked to fat metabolism in salmon.
Okay.
So it could be that the higher manganese is actually contributing to the increased fat content.
Interesting.
And then there's fillet firmness. You know how firm the flesh is.
Yeah.
And they found that the mid-region, the 0+ fish and the ML1 fish, had firmer fillets.
Okay.
Now, this is where it gets a little tricky.
Okay.
Faster growth, like we saw in the North, can sometimes lead to softer fillets.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they grow so fast that the flesh doesn't have time to firm up.
Interesting.
But the study suggests that the higher iron and manganese in the ML1 diet might be helping with protein synthesis,
Okay.
which would make the fillets firmer.
Okay, so it's like those minerals are building blocks.
Yeah, they're helping to build those strong proteins in the muscle.
Interesting.
On the other hand, the ML2 diet with the higher zinc and selenium, even though it's good for antioxidants, it might not be doing as much for protein synthesis.
So it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. You know, different mineral balances have different effects.
Okay.
And just to round things out, fillet thickness was lower in the West,
Okay.
but higher in the 0+ and ML1 fish.
Okay.
So again, age and mineral level are playing a role.
Right.
Okay, now let's shift gears and talk about welfare.
Okay, so how are the fish actually doing?
Yeah, how happy and healthy are they? And one way to measure that is by looking at their skin.
Okay.
They gave the fish skin scores, and the lower the score, the better.
Okay, so a low score means healthy skin.
Exactly, fewer lesions and stuff like that.
Okay.
And they found that the ML2 diet, that reduced mineral premix diet,
Yeah.
actually had a lower skin scores.
Interesting. That's good.
Yeah, it's good for their skin.
Okay.
And remember, zinc is really important for skin repair.
Right.
So the higher zinc and selenium in the ML2 diet probably helped protect their skin.
Okay, so it's like they're healing faster.
Yeah, and those antioxidants are probably helping too.
Right.
Keeping their skin healthy.
Okay, cool.
Then there's fin scores.
Okay, so how are their fins looking?
Yeah, nice and intact, no damage, and they found that 0+ fish and the ones fed organic minerals had better fin scores.
Okay.
But there were also these complicated interactions with location and mineral level.
Okay.
But the main takeaway is that the ML2 diet with its higher zinc levels was linked to better fin health.
Okay, so again, zinc is good.
Zinc seems to be a superstar when it comes to external health.
Okay.
You know, it helps with wound healing and keeping those fins strong,
Right.
which is super important for them to swim and avoid injuries.
Yeah, so they can escape predators and stuff.
Exactly. It's all about survival.
Okay.
Then there's visceral fat scores.
Okay, what's that?
That's how much fat they have around their internal organs.
Okay.
And they found that the North region had lower visceral fat scores,
Interesting.
which could be because the water's colder up there.
Okay.
And that might make them use energy more efficiently.
Okay. Like they're burning more calories just to stay warm.
Exactly, so they don't store as much fat.
Makes sense.
But the West had higher visceral fat scores.
Oh, okay.
Probably because the water's warmer there and they might be eating more.
Oh, so they're getting more calories and storing more fat.
Yeah, it's a combination of factors.
Right.
And, you know, higher visceral fat can actually reduce the amount of usable fillet you get.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it can affect the final product.
Interesting. Okay.
And finally, let's talk about liver health.
Okay, the liver's important.
Super important. They looked at liver scores and also something called the hepatosomatic index,
Okay.
which basically tells you how big the liver is compared to the body size.
Okay.
And they found that 0+ fish and the 1+ fish on that ML2 diet,
Yeah.
they had better liver conditions.
Okay, so the reduced mineral premix diet is good for the liver.
Seems like, and again, those higher zinc and selenium levels are probably helping,
Right, protecting it.
yeah, protecting the liver from damage.
Yeah.
While too much iron and manganese can actually be bad for the liver.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they can cause oxidative stress.
So it's all about balance again.
Balance is key.
Okay.
All right, now let's dive into the really nerdy stuff.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's talk about tissue composition or mineralization.
Okay, so what's actually inside the fish?
Yeah, what kind of minerals are they storing in their bodies and where?
Okay.
So when they looked at the whole body, they found that copper was higher in the fish, fed the ML2 diet, and also the ones fed organic minerals.
Okay.
Now, the copper levels in the feed were actually similar between the two diets.
Okay.
But remember how we talked about iron and copper being rivals?
Yeah.
Well, the lower iron in the ML2 diet probably allowed the fish to absorb and store more copper.
Okay, so the iron wasn't in the way.
Exactly. The copper could finally shine.
Okay.
And it's worth noting that the copper levels were generally high across all the fish in the study.
Interesting.
Now, iron levels in the whole body weren't really affected by the diet, but they did vary depending on location, and there were some weird interactions between age and mineral source.
Okay.
And manganese, surprisingly, was higher in the ML2 fish, even though they got less manganese in their diet.
Really?
Yeah, again, it could be because of that lower iron giving the manganese more room to be absorbed.
Okay, so it's like a mineral party and everyone's fighting for space.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And zinc was highest in the West, and selenium was highest in the West, the ML1 diet and organic diets.
Okay, so location, diet, source, it all matters.
It's so complex. It
Yeah.
really shows you that it's not just about how much of a mineral you put in the feed.
Right?
It's about how they interact with each other and how the fish's environment and age affect things.
Okay.
Now, when they look specifically at the fillet, they found some interesting things too.
Okay.
Copper was lower in the ML1 fish, especially in the north,
Okay.
and the West had the lowest copper levels in their fillets.
Interesting.
And remember how we talked about copper being important for connective tissue and melanin production?
Yeah.
Well, this lower copper could be why those ML1 fish had more gaping and melanin spots.
Okay, so it's all coming together.
It all ties back to those mineral levels.
Right.
And iron, zinc, and selenium were generally lower in the north and in the ML2 fish.
Okay.
And manganese was lowest in the West.
Interesting.
So again, location and diet are playing a big role in what ends up in the fillet.
Right.
And this is important because the mineral content of the fillet directly affects its quality.
Right. It affects how it looks, how it tastes, how it cooks.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay.
Now, they also looked at other tissues like the liver, the gills, the kidney, and the spleen.
Yeah.
And they found all sorts of interesting things like
Okay.
organic minerals led to lower copper in the liver,
Okay.
and higher zinc in the gills was linked to higher zinc in the diet.
Okay.
And the skin had higher zinc and manganese with the ML2 diet.
Okay.
And the kidney had higher zinc and selenium with organic feed.
Okay.
And the spleen had higher selenium with the ML2 diet.
Wow. So it's like each organ has its own preference.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes sense because these different organs have different jobs.
Right.
Like the gills and the skin are the first line of defense against infection.
Right.
So it makes sense that they would store minerals that help with immunity.
Okay.
And the liver is all about storage and detoxification.
Right.
So its mineral profile is going to be different too. It's
Okay.
all about what each organ needs to do its job.
Makes sense.
And lastly, they looked at the skin histology of the 0+ smolts.
Okay, so like the structure of their skin.
Yeah, under a microscope, and they found that the epidermal and dermal tissue areas were bigger in the north,
Okay.
and the mid-region had more of those mucus cells,
Yeah.
especially the blue-stained ones, while the north had more of the purple-staining ones.
Interesting.
And there were all these interactions between mineral levels, source, and location.
Okay.
So it's like the skin is adapting to the specific environment.
Right.
And the minerals are playing a role, too.
Okay.
Because you know that mucus layer is super important for protection.
Right. It's like a shield.
Yeah, it keeps out bacteria and parasites.
Okay.
And minerals like zinc are known to help with mucus production and skin healing.
So it's all connected.
It all comes back to those minerals.
Okay. Well, this has been a really in-depth look at salmon.
It has.
And it seems like the main takeaway is that it's complicated.
It is complicated.
Like you can't just throw a bunch of minerals at them and expect them to be healthy.
Yeah, that's the big aha moment for me.
Right.
It's all about balance.
The balance.
The balance of minerals, the source of the minerals, and even where you're raising the fish.
It all matters.
It all matters.
And this has real implications for salmon farming, right?
Absolutely.
Like we need to be smarter about how we formulate their feed.
Yeah, we need to tailor it to their age, to the region they're in.
To all these factors.
To all these factors to make sure they're getting the right mix of minerals.
Right. And ultimately, it's about producing healthier, higher quality salmon.
Exactly. Salmon that's good for the fish and good for the people who eat it.
Right.
It's a win-win.
Okay, well, this has really made me think about all the different factors involved in salmon farming.
Me too.
And it makes me wonder about, what other things we haven't even considered yet.
Yeah.
Like, What about the genetics of the fish?
That's a good question.
Or the specific types of plants they're eating?
Yeah.
Or the water quality?
So many things we still need to explore.
Like a never-ending puzzle.
It is, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
Always more to learn.
Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive.
It has.
Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
Welcome.
It's really made me appreciate the complexity of salmon farming.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just throwing some fish in a pen and feeding them.
Right.
It's a science.
It's a science.
And we're still learning so much.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting.
It is.
All right, well, thanks again.
Anytime.
Until next time.
See you. Bye.